I would firmly believe that simplicity is the key to execution, and the students have done a wonderful job in terms of highlighting some key points, but a very interesting and simple methodology to conduct, to do a survey, put the findings across in very crisp terms. So, a good start, I would say, to this program, and I'm very happy to be here and sitting with a very distinguished set of panelists. So happy to be here. So I'll get into my job straight away. I did understand in the beginning that the panelists felt that we should have more questions than and preaching a lot of answers. So I'm sure that you are thirsty and hungry to know more. And the backdrop of this presentation has highlighted probably what are the key challenges and where do we need some of the answers. So in order to just set the tone for this group, and I'll leave to the rest of the panelists to pitch in how they would like to contribute. The subject of strategy, all of us know, is basically we are faced with market and competition. So our strategy formulation is mostly directed towards trying to control market forces and shape competition, or shape the competitive environment. I would put it in simplistic terms. Over the period of years, there's lots of tools that have emerged, whether it is looking at the 4 competitive forces, or it's looking at different models in terms of industry attractiveness, business competition, business competence, or core competencies. There are lots of different models to put our thoughts together in terms of how do we understand the competitive environment, or in terms of what should guide strategy formulation. Today, sitting in the second half, our thoughts are on execution. And one of the things that we probably, I have more than 20 years as a practicing manager, and one of the things that we've seen, especially in our organization, in HDFC Bank, which stands out, while you need the right business model, that's for sure. Business models could vary. But what I would say from my own experience of being in HDFC Bank in the last 10 years, if we say that why is HDFC Bank number 1 or numero 1 in the banking sector, I would say one of the key things that has been there, which has helped us in terms of having this top place in the competition, is that strategy involves doing a number of things right. It's not just about a model. There are numerous things that need to be done right on a day-to-day basis. And execution, I would put it in very simple terms, is how many of those things do you execute largely right in your day-to-day activities. There is a lot of activities, elements to simple execution, and it's that portion probably that is key in terms of how do you implement those numerous activities that need to be done perfect. It goes without saying, you need the right type of culture, you need the right type of leadership, the people processes that are involved to get there. But yes, execution involves simple, straightforward steps that need to be done repetitively across the organization. It's not that strategy, like in your questions you asked top management, middle management about the importance or challenges of strategy. Strategy is not only at the top. The thing is, how do you, through the performance management system or the goal setting process, how does key objectives translate and cascade down right up to the front line? That is key, and that has to be done in a simple way, so that even the frontline staff, the middle-level manager, the senior manager, and the leadership at the top are all connected through the performance appraisal system or the objective review system in terms of managing strategy or executing strategy. Some of the simple examples or items for us, I would take the example of a retail bank, a retail banking setup. Important element of our strategy execution is how do you get our identity across? How do you create a market identity? The market identity is not just a sticker that you put, that you got X products or you got a particular price advantage. In banking terms, the identity probably is in terms of trust and loyalty. People trust you, or people believe your brand and they come to you, and that's on top of mind. They are able to relate every campaign that you put out. If you see a campaign on personal loans, or you see a campaign that you can open accounts instantly, every campaign must at the bottom of it actually relate to that identity. How do we create that identity in the minds of customers so that it's very strong? And that's how probably value gets created. The second aspect of is in terms of, we may have a diverse product portfolio, offering to every segment. Today, if you look at our banking sector, whether it is a retail customer, it's a mid-market segment, or it is a small shop owner, to being in the rural geography, we offer loans for farmers, to small businesses. We are present in every segment, right up to the high end of being an investment banker. Every product is available. But at the same time, understanding needs of customer becomes very critical. That's how do we segment customers, and that segmentation, is it understood at the front line? It becomes very clear, critical for those who run the product management, etc., that yes, is it very clear and clearly articulated in terms of segmentation? Unless the front line understands that segmentation, you won't get your products across. At the same time, along with the variety, as I mentioned earlier, the beauty is how to keep it simple so that your entire sales force understand it. In our model in HDFC Bank, we believe the branch, we have spread over 3,300 branches across the country, almost in every state, getting to a situation where we are probably present in every district in the country. Today, close to 40% of our branches are in rural geographies, very interior and remote. It's not that we are only present in metro or urban centers. So it becomes, and when we say the branch is a one-stop shop for all financial services, just imagine that frontline salesperson who may be a graduate or an MBA, he needs to know every product. So it's probably impossible to get strategy across if you expect the frontline person to know every product and every process in the bank. But yes, that's where the key comes in terms of simplification. Second is, not only will simplification is not only the key, the front line needs to be backed with very good support. So you have operations, many other support functions. So the bank in terms actually needs to function like a football team. You have players in every position, but everybody's eye is on the ball, that is to service the customer. And I think, as the panelists also touch upon very many other points, I would say that is key to the getting strategy across is how do you ensure that all functions in the organization combine very well. Another point that I would touch upon, I would expect also the panel would cover in detail, is probably, I think, the culture in the organization. What type of organization culture is it? Because strategy, as I mentioned, needs to cut right through the organization, where everybody is involved. So the culture in terms of the leadership, the people processes are going to be critical. And one of the very important process for any organization to get its strategy execution correct is to have a robust performance appraisal system, including very good feedback and development process for people. So I would request my fellow panelists to throw more light in terms of different aspects of execution, right from whether it is how we deal with it on the front line, or how we in terms of organize for success, and what are the various factors that probably are key to execution.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in such distinguished company. I must thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to be here. What I did was I went through the outline of the program that was provided earlier, and I put that down into a few slides. They're just here as personal experiences that I'd like to share with you, and my apologies in advance in case anything is seen as slighting or belittling anyone. That is not the intention. The intention is just to bring out the differences in strategy execution that we've seen. All right. If I may, maybe I'll come down so you can see the slides. Yeah. We've discussed strategy formulation in the morning, and we're trying to talk about execution. And this was the brief. And we find that why is it that global experiences show us that most strategies fail us time after time. And I think I'll just share a couple of things. Why an organization does something is what we commonly call its vision. What it is supposed to do is the strategy, and how it goes about doing it is the actual execution. And this is where my personal experience has been that most organizations tend to falter. Perhaps the reason for this is that top management is seen to be looking at only strategy. I don't know why, but most of the people I come across seem to think it is the leader's job to sit back, think, pontificate, strategize. And they think it is beneath their dignity to actually come out and execute. We think that the job of strategy is for the leader and it is for lesser managers to actually go around and execute. And this is where the problem arises. Because there are consultants, there are reams of theory, there are theses, there are international management thinkers who will talk about strategy. Unfortunately, very few speak about strategy, and therefore very few people really understand what it is. This is not mine. I've copied it from somebody I consider the guru of execution, Professor Ram Charan, and you can read about it in his book. So I leave that. So if strategy was so simple, what's wrong? If execution was so simple, what actually goes wrong? Why don't things move? I've already mentioned that people think the leaders do only strategy formulation. They don't understand that strategy and execution are actually supposed to be the same thing, and the responsibility for both has to rest with the same person. Consequently, as far as execution is concerned, there is no desire. As I mentioned before, there is no knowledge, and unfortunately, there is no glamour. Execution, rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, going out into the shop floor, for some reason is considered a down market, a less glamorous job. And I think that's where the problem comes in. I've taken two examples, given the fact that I'm a career banker. I'm sorry restricting it to banking here. But we all know, I'm sure Philip here also mentioned that when the private sector bank started, everyone had the same vision. They all said we could be great on a middle of the road strategy, right? The nationalized banks had no products, no customer service, no systems, no desire to increase, no reward for enhancing shareholder returns, because the majority shareholder everywhere was the government in any case. Right? The foreign banks had all of these, but what they did not have was a branch network. So what did the new private sector banks decide? They said, let's go in, let's take the systems, the products, the customer service ethos of the foreign banks, and let's try and see if our expansion is going to be simpler, thanks to RBI being slightly more amenable to expansion of Indian banks, and let's build something. And thanks to the example set by HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, Axis Bank, etc., we saw several other banks, especially the old private sector banks, trying to do it. I have brought two examples here. One is Dhanalakshmi Bank, and I don't know if you're aware, they hired Amitabh Chaturvedi from ICICI Bank to run it, and Reliance after that, sorry. Unfortunately, he had to leave in about 3 years. I'm not going to get into the numbers here, because this is a strategy session, but if you look at it, what actually went wrong? Why did the CEO have to leave? As you can see, they changed everything from the logo to the spelling of the name as well. And I put in the pre-2008 and the post-2008 logos. There was far too much emphasis on growth. And unfortunately, when you try to build for growth, costs do tend to stay ahead of income. That's what happened. The biggest problem happened because the unions were not with the managing director. They did not offer their full support. Indeed, most of the unions actually went out of the way to create problems, including reporting to RBI about some accounting issues, etc., etc. And what happened was, and I think this was the biggest problem as far as my experience goes, this is a Thrissur-based bank, deep in Kerala. The CEO decided to set up the head office in Bombay. So what happens? The majority of the bank, most of the bank's business, the branches, the human resources were in Kerala. And suddenly they find that everything to do with their future is being decided in some room in Lower Parel in Bombay. And that created a fair amount of discontent. And I'd like to examine that with another bank that's been in the news. Vishwaveer Ahuja moved from Bank of America after being CEO of India for several years and set up. And the first thing he did when taking over as CEO was actually move to Kolhapur, because that is the head office of Ratnakar Bank. He camped there for 6 months. Then for several months after that, he was traveling to Kolhapur 2 to 3 times a week. And even today, he is there at least 4 to 5 days a month. All communication to staff, and he was prepared to handle the old staff, was personally through town hall meetings. He met with them, he tried to allay their fears, he tried to tell them what exactly the bank was doing, and I think that is the best way to buy their support for the strategy. The first thing he did was not to try and do in Bombay. They have a very fancy office in Bombay now, India Bull Center, I think. But the first thing he did was to spruce up the head office in Kolhapur. He set up a regional processing center in Kolhapur, and the first focus of the bank to try out its new systems and strategies and customer service was in Kolhapur. And he moved out of Kolhapur only when their share of the business went up from 4% to 10%. Got international known investors, because the moment it's known that large international names are backing this, as Philip mentioned just a while back, it's all a question of trust. And the more people see that large backers are behind this bank, the more the confidence builds up, the trust builds up, and the bank does better. Very importantly, put the right people in the right job. This is extremely important, and I'll give another example a while back, a little later. And to everyone in his team, he laid out a very clear roadmap, saying this is what we will do, this is how we will do, this is when we will do, and we will list in 2015. So what clearly comes out, it's not just enough to have a clear strategy. Both the banks had more or less the same strategy. Practically every private sector bank in the country today has the same strategy. The difference lies in execution. And why was execution successful? Because he was willing to dirty his hands, he was willing to travel by train and bus and car to Kolhapur, because he was willing to spend time with his people, and he was willing to ensure that he does a regular review of everything, all the strategy that's being done. Quick, and Philip, please tell me if I'm wrong anywhere here. I've taken this from an interview with Aditya Puri as perhaps the best example of strategy that one can set. 4 points, and I think these 4 points describe what HDFC is. You put your strategy down in very simple terms that everyone understands. Know your business so you don't ask for something that they can't deliver. You have to know your business, you have to know your people, and you have to give them targets that they can achieve. You have to make sure you tie it up, you review it regularly, and move ahead. I mean, is he asking them to grow at 10 times GDP? 5 times GDP? There's nothing. Cost income ratio will reduce. Yes, it will reduce. Economies of scale will kick in. And how do you control NPAs? Well, keep in mind that in India, demand for banking services is more than the supply. The trick lies in going out and finding out new areas. And I think Philip described some of these new areas of banking where you can actually go and start building. So to summarize, these are my views. Again, taken from a mishmash of personal experience and some readings that we've done. You must understand your business completely, be realistic and aware of it, have a clear and understandable strategy, ensure follow-up and reward linkage. I forgot to mention, Ratnakar Bank and HDFC Bank have had perhaps some of the best stock option schemes we have seen. And don't ask me to tell you what the stock options are worth in HDFC Bank today. Maybe in the Q&A session we can ask him. Okay? Ensure follow-up and reward linkage. Your reward has to be linked to your performance. I'm sorry, there is really no other way to get people to perform. And create an environment for proper execution. This is the culture that we were talking about a while back. I have divided into two parts, what we call the hardware and the software. The hardware is getting the right people, the organization structure, your KRAs, your incentives, etc., in place. But the software is more a culture of communication. What is it that you encourage in your people? How do you review? You review it regularly, and do you have a robust process of dialogue? These are my points. I'll be happy to take questions later on wherever we are. Thank you all so much.
I think that gave us a very inside and deep insight into looking at strategies of different companies. One that's not working, something else that's on the right path, and obviously a model strategy. So that gives us a clear background in terms of how strategy compares and what are the important facets about right from leadership involvement to communication to setting the right processes, whether it be rewards. So I will go on to the next panelist, Mr. Ravi Srinivasan.
Yeah, okay, so what I've done is from a perspective of organization and executive, and I think during the introduction it was shared that I used to manage strategy for HP in a particular business unit for Asia Pacific and Japan for a long time, and then shifted out. In that, I managed 3 mergers and acquisitions, not in the actual acquisition, but in the execution. So some of the aspects which came in the research that the participants have done, we'll really talk about. And more importantly, I took this opportunity that Dr. Nitika gave me also to learn more about execution, because that research showed that execution is something that we probably need to learn more. We pay so much attention to the formulation of the strategy, be it the framework and the latest information, but when it comes to execution, there seems to be some gap. And I thought, let me learn and share it with everybody and perhaps even learn more. So this is where I come from. And here are some of the things which really came about very, very clearly. And this is based on research done by really leading people. And I have information on that, but I won't go into detail. I just want to share. Remember what we talked about, the clarity that one of the vision, and also about in the formulation of what the flowchart that he put up is not only why, but also what and how. And that really required the top management not just sit there and make slides. And I don't know how many of you were present in Anil's session in the morning when he kicked off. And he said, I don't want for Max India 86 slides. You should be able to talk with 1 slide, and that's where really the clarity comes. If you can say something in 6 words, that means you really know what you're saying. So this is where the clarity comes, and I'll share some research about that. And in the communication, I think what's also very clear is also the structure and the content and the modality of communication. And that really differentiated across various organizations which executed well vis-a-vis those organizations which could not. So that was one thing which I really learned, that modality and the content and the mode of communication was equally important. And I've seen that. In HP, we used to have a policy called open door policy, and you didn't have to take time with the manager. You could just walk in and talk. Okay? Another very important thing I told you that I worked in the region was a cultural sensitivity. Extremely important when you are doing multi-geography, multi-business, and multi-function kind of strategy execution. Because the way the sales people talk would be very different than the way the finance people talk. The way the people in Japan would take strategy execution would be very different from the way people in India would take the execution. And even in India, there will be different cultural differences and the background differences. So one needs to be really, really clear about what is this clarity and effectiveness of communication. We talked about changes in the external environment, and that becomes a very, very important aspect in the execution. Execution is at the ground level, and things keep changing. And you need to not be reactive to it, but proactive to it. So let me give you a very, very simple example. I think it's a Ram Subramanian, he's a McKinsey person. He talked about Federer being one of the top persons in this thing and talked about sports. And he talked about what would have happened had he been a badminton person, etc. Something else totally struck me at that time. I've seen two things. You know, Michael Schumacher, who unfortunately right now is in the hospital with serious illness. They were interviewing him, and he was the 6th time the world champion. And they were asking him, what does it really differentiate a Formula One driver? And he said, is it the ability to respond, or what is it that really makes a difference? He took the interviewer and he said, you have a scale? He said, yeah. So he got a 12-inch scale, and he said, listen, here it is, right? Take the 12-inch, he drops it, okay, from here. All of us catch it between 6 to 8 inches when the thing is traveling. And he said, Michael said, you do it for me. Michael did exactly at 6 inches. So he said it is not the ability to respond that matters why a Formula One driver is successful. He said the difference is the successful Formula One driver is able to take multiple variables and process them, prioritize them, and process them fast enough. That's what makes a difference. And the same thing is true for an excellent strategy executioner. Is that executioner or executor? So, either way. So, it's how you can look at variables which keep changing and then see what the priorities are and then be able to take the right one and move forward. And this is where the difference between what is called business basics, business fundamentals, and business breakthrough comes in. A guy who can do and take the right decisions and do the changes and not be worried about it does what's called a business breakthrough. That then again becomes a very, very important aspect of it. One of the most important things, we talked about agility in the morning, is many of the people who get involved in strategy execution somehow feel resource constrained. And that's where the difference comes. That in fact today, those people who are doing HR and things like that, you've got enough instruments to see what is your strength and how resource constrained you feel, and you have development activities to get over it. And you need to be sensitive to it, that am I resource constrained? How do I get over it? Because you can't be just waiting for the headquarters to keep pumping in the resources. You've got to be very, very innovative right then and there to solve it and do it. That becomes a very, very important element, and we've seen that happen. We've seen that happen at the ground level, and we've had to do in countries where we didn't get any budgetary allocation, but yet we managed as to how we change things. And that's again one of the most important aspects, and really making it forward. And that requires two things. It requires adaptability and it requires agility. Both combined together is what makes a difference. And the last part is something that I really would request all of you to pay a tremendous amount of attention, because that is making a big difference in the way needle is moving. Okay? This has to do any organization you do, if the strategy or anything needs to be executed well, they need to be committed. If they need to be committed, they need to be engaged. And if they need to be engaged, they need to be emotionally connected. This is what is the most important aspect of it. And I have enough data to share about all these things, but I'm just going to stop it here. So in the survey, remember there's engagement and emotional commitment. I think people need to really see the alignment and see how they're connected. All right? Thank you so much.
Calling me to Soil. This is my first visit, and it's really an interesting institution, very different from other educational institutions that I've gone to, where values are at least talked about. I come from a little different world from where the other panelists are coming from. I come from the social sector, and now social sector involved with government programs. So it's a very different world. But strategy is important everywhere. So I will focus by taking a case study of a program, flagship program of the Government of India, which I am involved in, and what are the challenges in strategy execution primarily, because planning has been a strength in the government. You have planning commission, you have nice papers, you have good policies, and execution has been rotten. So it's really strategy execution which really is in many ways holding back the country. So I'm involved in a program called the National Rural Livelihood Mission, which really looks at how to work with the poorest 300 million people in the rural areas of India. And how do we scale up rural poverty reduction to the national level? And how do you execute such a program successfully so that the history of good money pouring down bad program execution is removed? And so we have tried to make this, and with the World Bank's help in really designing the program, we have to make this at least a new generation program for tackling rural poverty. So I'm just giving 3-4 slides just to give the background. This is the context, and then I'll talk about what are the challenges in execution. So we are talking about a national issue. It's not about one company or one firm. So average GDP growth, very high, but absolute rural poor, 45 million households, small marginal farmers, 53 million, land disabled, 56. So malnutrition and hunger, which the country is being hit because it's worse than sub-Saharan Africa, 230 million people. So we are getting stunted kids in the next generation. So this is really a national challenge. What does the program try to do? It really, there's been a history of programs in the Government of India on rural poverty, how to tackle it. Really learn from that, so we did a systematic learning exercise from various programs. And essentially it's about increasing inclusive growth opportunities for the rural poor so that they participate in the modernization process that is happening in this country today, in terms of skill development, in terms of opportunities for education, and in terms of structuring the migration, etc. So that there's a win-win situation. It's not a kind of that you have a high growth, high income enclave, and then there's the rest of the country, which is what inclusive growth is about. The program essentially focuses on 2 aspects. The first aspect is what we call mobilization gap. That is, the poor are poor because they are dispersed, they're individual, they do not have a voice, so you have these kind of elites in the villages who capture everything, whatever benefits are going. So unless they are mobilized into groups and they have a voice and they are empowered, you really cannot get the benefits to them. That's the first assumption and premise on which this program is made. And you make an analysis, you see that actually it's in the south, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, where mobilization has been very good. Poverty has also gone down. Economic growth is also happening. And then you have Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, MP, Rajasthan, where, so, it's linked. It's not that, growth is happening in the south. There's also been a mobilization. The second pillar of the program is credit. That unless you invest, like we invest in industry, unless you invest in the poor, unless you provide capital, they are not going to get out of poverty. So there's a minimum level which we have estimated as 1 lakh per family at least, which they require. Again, when we see that from various data from the Reserve Bank of India, etc., the picture is similar. That poor people need money. They do not get money in all these states. But in AP, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, the whole system of bank credit flowing to the rural areas and to the rural poor is very, very different. So these two gaps, along with other things which we define of knowledge, skills, market access, must be bridged. But these two gaps are very important to bridging. Mobilization, so that they can crowd in through their voice different benefits which are there, and access to money, basically access to credit. Okay. Now, at the ground level, I just want to explain the model, then I'll go to strategy, execution. So what are we trying to build? We are trying to build institutions of the poor. And this is not about panchayats. This is about poor women, mobilizing them into self-help groups and making federations. So aggregating and federating poor women, small marginal farmers, etc. into certain, it's like industry association at a micro level. Now once we have this aggregation, then a lot of things happen. And we have seen this in Bihar where we have a successful project. We have seen it in MP where we have a successful project. So it becomes your delivery channel. What is wrong with our system in India? Why is the government pouring in so much money and nothing is happening at the ground level? Because it never reaches, everyone talks about it. So here what we're trying to do is really make the retail kind of the branch, both the beneficiary as well the service provider. So you get out of all the layers of middlemen who really take away the money. And once we do that, then access to entitlements, market linkage, capital financial services, production, and public services all get, bundled and provided. So they create village organizations out of the women, about say 500 women, and then bundle. So they run a microcredit bank and then they on-lend to the other. So it also removes the distribution problem of the banks in some ways. So this is a core model. Now if we have to do this with 200 million people across 400,000 villages, it's a challenge in itself. So, but it is a flagship program of the government. There's an investment of 10,000 crores per year. So we are talking about, if you're talking in company terms, it's talking about a 10,000 crore turnover company. And we are involved, World Bank is involved in really creating the superstructure, which is not the core money which has to go to the poor, but how do you deliver this money? Which means the structure, the systems, the knowledge management, etc., to deliver this program. So what are the challenges if you have to implement this strategy? And the first challenge when we are talking of strategy in a public domain, in a public sector versus in a say entrepreneur-owned, driven, is multi-stakeholders. So you have the politicians, you have the bureaucracy, you have the companies, you have the poor people themselves. Now in that whole multiple stakeholder system, how do you get people to matching goals and a strategic focus is a challenge in itself. Because all these programs, one of the reasons why they are not successful is because they get pulled in different directions. So clarity of vision, which your survey has shown, is very, very important. But converting that clarity of vision to a buy-in by multiple stakeholders is a challenge in itself in the public sector. The second real big challenge is scale and reach. So 230 million dispersed over 400,000 villages. And here again in strategy execution, like Philip mentioned, everyone must know the strategy. So if you have to build such groups, then the village worker has to understand that strategy, and it's a little bit complex than just simple selling of a simple product, consumer product. So given this whole wide scale, there is a massive challenge in really communication and capacity building of staff. So this whole program now employs 20,000 persons drawn. The selection is based on value systems, on compassion, on are they interested in working with the poor, and some amount of competency tests. But really to implement this program, they need to be capacitated. So it's a massive human resource, not management, but human resource creation and capacitating challenge that has to be faced. The fourth challenge is in the government, and this is why everyone says, government, is we have now cracked it by getting studies done and so on, is the government systems in terms of pure, say, business processes is 40 years behind time. So, they have the file system, the file noting system, decision making is highly centralized, and so on. So, some system re-engineering is essential to do this. So, in terms of, when we looked at this massive challenge, we had to really break it up and disaggregate on what do we take up first. So, I think the vision, we had to get a political buy-in, which was there in this government. Then the structure we had to think, because structure is something in the government system which really, where the cookie crumbles. So we have to think of, if you have to have that's why we call it a mission. But if you have to have this as a mission, then how can we create a separate structure? So what we call a special purpose vehicle kind of thing. So what one has done is really taken this out of the typical departmental kind of structure which the government runs on, and created a special mission structure, both at the central level, which is called the National Mission Management Unit for this mission, and at the state level where they are state rural livelihood missions, which is a structure where we are trying to combine the efficiencies of the private sector, the commitment of the NGO sector, and the reach of the government. So once we take that out and then man it with a very, very different kind of people from the government, old government people who are used to a certain patronage model and so on, and create a different culture, then it is possible to run this program. We have been successful in some states, we have not been successful in other states. Strangely, we have been very successful in Bihar. We are not strangely or not strangely, I don't know, but we have not been yet successful in states like Karnataka. So what we find is that, when we label some states as good or bad and political leadership good or bad, it doesn't work. It's sometimes, I don't know, sometimes it's the stars probably, of the right combination of factors of the CM taking the right, understanding the program and taking the right decision which really gets it going. So the structure is one issue where I think, large programs, implementation, execution of strategy, if you don't get the structure right, there's going to be a problem. The second is, then how do you make the structure function, which is about manning it with the right kind of human resources and capacitating. So we found for this kind of work, you do not get ready-made people. It's a combination of skills that is required, that is not easily available from any educational institution. So then capacitating and training becomes a very, very important function of these programs. The last point I want to make is that, see, so how do we learn? If we have a success in executing strategy, because this is across the country, it is a decentralized system. Now we find that in some places we are succeeding and others we are not. So in these large spread out systems, I think executing of strategy is linked to learning of the organization system as a whole. So how do we learn from something which has succeeded in one state, not succeeded in others, something which has succeeded in some districts, not succeeded? To create that system of learning, we came up with the concept of what we call resource blocks. That is some districts and some areas which have succeeded in some, say succeeded in mobilization. In other districts they have succeeded in the microcredit delivery. Other districts have succeeded in it. We have called them resource blocks or immersion blocks, where then the rest of the whole cohort of human resources from different states, and this is right from top to bottom we take people for exposure visits and immersion. So, from secretaries in the government to chief ministers, because you have to build that constituency and really spend time over there and make them immersion states, which then can spread to the other areas. This is one methodology that we have learned and evolved, which if you have a countrywide system, a countrywide program, which how to make that a learning system is a challenge itself. It's not, so strategy execution is, as everyone else, other panelists said, it cannot be just a prop-driven communication. It has to many times evolve. Successes evolve at one place, and we have to learn, and others have to learn from the successes at that place. So I'll stop here. Thanks.
I would like to thank the panel members for such wonderful deliberations. And we are now open for question and answers, so please feel free to ask your questions to the panel members.
This is Hari, I'm from Business Leadership Program. I just want to know, we are told that the program was so much successful in Bihar. So how difficult was it to convince the stakeholders? Then my second question is, it didn't work in this to convince the stakeholders, various stakeholders, the politicians, the government itself. My second question is, you said that it failed in the south. So what was the difference?
Is interested in it. So it's the same thing in public programs. So you need what we call a political buy-in. So in Bihar, the chief minister was interested in this program, has understood it very well, and supports this program very well. Otherwise, the bureaucracy can, wipe out a program. They're not accountable in that. So that has helped definitely. So the CM is a key stakeholder in the program, and he sees political value also, because if you mobilize, in Bihar they will mobilize 2 million women, 500,000 households in 9 districts. They're going to 30 districts. So there's a political payback. It's like PE investment in votes in that sense. So there's a payback. So they understand that, but I must say the CM there was he's very sharp at understanding the mobilization dimension and really respects that and so on. So he is also personally committed. So I think it helps. Definitely it helps because just keeping it at the bureaucracy level, often there's all kinds of things, the transfers and the committed officer but not committed IS officer and so on. So it helps. Lower level, it doesn't matter, because my whole idea is you go direct to the poor and work with them. You don't go through any intermediary.
So that sounds like how was it different? So we were told that in Karnataka it didn't work. So how that was difficult?
That is luck. It's when I say multiple stakeholders buy-in, so there's the structure in a constitution. So there is chief minister, there are ministers, there's chief secretary, there's a rural development secretary. Sometimes you get alignment. As I say, If you have 4 out of the 5 guys committed to the program, it works. If you have 2 out of 5, doesn't matter at which level, it doesn't work. Because at each level, so that's what I'm saying. It is not, see, when you go to the public system, it is not like a owner-driven corporation. The stakeholders are many, and at any time the stakeholders can kind of either take it forward or bring it back. So I think that is what has happened in Karnataka, that we haven't had either the right project director, the right principal secretary in rural development, or the commitment of the government was also very, very different.
I'm Yogesh, and this question is to you, Dr. Singh. You see, we have had the microfinance institutions working in Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka, and they were also doing mobilization at grassroots level, creating self-help groups, and giving them some credit. In a way, you are also doing a similar service. Is my understanding correct? Or you are doing something different or something more than what they were doing in this mission?
So the models have been tested out. Self-help groups has been there, microfinance has been there, livelihoods has been done by private. Various NGOs have done it. But the challenge is to do it in scale and do it with quality. So scale with quality is the challenge. It is not per se the model itself. So I've done it myself 30 years back when I was, running around the villages. I've done it, implemented in 5 villages. When you reach 40, you say, I've only worked in 5 villages. So what am I doing? Am I doing it for my satisfaction, or do I have to reach it? There are 300 million poor people. Then you have to reach some numbers, no? So numbers matter. In India, numbers matter. So scale is very, very critical. But once you think scale, then you have to think system and strategy execution in a very different way than when you're thinking for a very small setup, very small company, or very small social enterprise. That is the thing. So, like I was talking Philip, 65,000 employees, so many, 5,000 bank branches. You have to think strategy execution in a very different way than when you're thinking for a very small scale thing. That is much easier. So that is the challenge.
I think from the morning, the sessions we have gone through, this is something which is being emphasized, and we really understand that. In terms of putting strategy in place, that is a beginning point which I think most of the people there in the corporate sector would understand, as Abhilash also had put it, that the strategies would almost be same across the companies. You know where to get and what kind of goals to be achieved. The beauty lies in and the difference lies in the execution of the strategy. Now, there the larger challenges, let's say, if there is a middle management who is fully aware of the execution and its implications and is working with Dhanlakshmi Bank and is not the part of the RBL Bank. So then, how do you bring about that change? Despite the fact you may understand that it is top down. So while in theory it is debated, every time we come across and say it's top down. But then in practicality, it is always also talked about it has to be bottom up. So let's say there is a case in point that there is somebody working in Dhanlakshmi Bank who truly understands that what it will take to execute this strategy, but then still it doesn't happen. And the person is at the middle level management. Then how do you think such issues can be cracked?
Okay, I think that's an excellent question. There's no easy answer to that. Right? I think in some part, Mr. Sen already answered it. When he says that if 2 out of 5 people have a buy-in, you may not succeed. But if you have 4 people out of 5 who have a buy-in, certainly your chances of success are so much more. Right? So the trick, right? It's very easy to say execution is making sure your strategy is communicated to everyone. That's saying it. The trick lies in actually getting the buy-in of every person down the line. So I would say that the job of the leader here is not to see why there is only one guy. He has to see why there are the 5 others who are not coming. What can I do? how can it be that people in the same environment, in the same organization, faced with the same challenges ahead, are thinking so differently? So I think that's where the true challenge lies. And the simple reason I put up that example was just to show, exactly as you said, that while the strategy might be same, what really ends up differentiating is the execution part. I hope that's an answer.
Is it okay if I just add something more? I did tell you that, I just put up the first slide, a lot more. Is it okay if I share something? Yeah, okay. So there are two things that effective companies have done, organizations have done. One is they have created a strategy accelerating team to make sure that the execution is done right, which goes into each aspect of what is happening at the execution level, not at just the communication and understanding level. That's one aspect of it, and is enough. The other very critical aspect, which we have seen, and it is very well kind of again research based, is I think most of the people in the organization need to understand there is something called a decision span. Is what is a decision I can take and what is it I cannot take? And whenever there is a more liberty that one sees in the culture of the organization, where you have a greater decision span, execution takes place very well. Otherwise, people get frozen. And the second aspect, and this is where the culture, the autonomy, and empowering thing takes place. And the decision span is something that one needs to be very, very conscious of. And the second aspect is one of information flow backwards. The people on the top who manage the resources need to know and own in case they get to know some resource constraints are there which cannot be solved at that level. Again, they need to respond fast, and this remember I was talking about the execution team, that helps them do that very well. Later on I'll be very happy to share the exact research showing this aspect. And it changes the effectiveness of execution up to 70% if you do this correctly. So these are the two things that I really like to share in terms of the execution.
Question is to Mr. Philip. Just when you were talking about HDFC branches, 40% of the branches are in the rural area. So my question is that is the people strategy for the rural area and the urban area different?
The people strategies for any organization are common. It has to have a, whether it's a performance appraisal process or it's a reward process. So we don't differentiate the people strategy in those terms. But yes, in terms of sourcing, you have a local market. From where do you want to source people so that you have better retention there? So those would change in terms of how you acquire people. But your talent development strategy, the growth strategies for people, the reward strategies for people, those would form a fairly uniform pattern.
This one is for Philip. Yeah, this one is for Philip. My name is Sanjay, basically food industry FMCG background, and been associated with Soil now for the last about 1.5 months as a visiting fellow. So, the question I wanted to ask in the context of the large attrition that is weakening execution for most of the FMCG industry. So first, in the initial stage, last 10-15 years, there was a lot of debate between the strategy versus execution, the doer versus thinker debate, where the doers were considered to be on the lower strata. But then companies realized that it is the doers who are actually bleeding out of the organization, because in the first wave, the telecom industries came in and then they took out a lot of good talent from the FMCG industry, and the execution weakened. And then the insurance and the banking industries came in, and again they took out a lot of trained resources from the FMCG industry, paying much higher salaries. So when you have this kind of situation, naturally the guys who execute at the front end are the guys who are moving out, and that's how the organizational execution gets weakened, no matter what your strategy is. So from the HR point of view, what kind of HR interventions would you recommend?
Let's touch upon a very important point. Obviously, if you've got to get strategy right or get it executed well, you need a very engaged workforce. So when you touch upon the subject of attrition is directly linked to how engaged is your workforce. And all of us know that money is not the only motivator or not the key motivator. It's more in terms of the job content, satisfaction, the culture of the place. Those are the key aspects which finally result in an engaged force. So as far as HR today is concerned, and in our context that is there, one is we definitely try to establish a lot of employee connect. Just like you have customer activation, you get a customer, you want the first 30 days, you try to sell him another product. Similarly in the organization, for us, we are an expanding organization, opening every year 300 to 400 branches. So it's very important as we have gone into deeper geographies, the HR team, along with business, take a very active interest in ensuring that right from onboarding, when a person joins, he's on an onboarding program, and after that has gone back to his place of work, that there is a regular contact program where there is one-to-one contact with individuals. It could be over the phone also. Then we try to ensure that there are skip level meets, town halls. So there's a lot of communication. Communication is the key for us, so that people know that they're not just performing a task, they know the larger objective of the bank, and most important, people want to stay connected. So in the organization is to create that vibrancy in terms of connect, where people know that they can be reached out to. I was just here in Delhi yesterday, and the manager was showcasing to me how he has sent out mails right across and put posters in every branch in the bank, telling people that, yeah, this is a contact, you can reach out to me. Just put out different, those faces that you have, you're dissatisfied, you're happy, you just want to communicate and say how you're feeling today, then please reach out. Apart from that, we also realize that there is a lot of need for other forums in terms of the workplace is also a place where you got to have fun. So a current contest that is on in the organization is a voice hunt contest, where the winner gets to sing or do a recording with Shankar Mahadevan. So like that, we try to ensure that there is a very active social platform, whether we have a sports event called Josh. So I think the HR role is to try and create this sort of connect and platform where not only is organization work objectives being communicated well and understood well, but also that the workplace is a place where people enjoy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lokesh Srivastava from Business Leadership Program at SOIL, and my question is for Dr. Singh. Sir, you said that there are around 20,000 people employed for NRLM, and there are various capacity needs for that. So what are the various strategic interventions for capacity building mechanisms? And my second question is, what is the situation of NRLM in UP? Is it working or is it not working? Yeah. And if it's not working?
I don't want to get into this state. I gave that as an example. So I don't want to, but first question, I'll answer. On capacity building. So, see there, these 20,000 people are dispersed across the state, but they also are at different levels. So there are some people working at the village level and block level. There are some people at the leadership level, and every state is headed by a kind of officer, but he's a CEO essentially of this large project. So firstly, we have to have different kinds of programs for capacity building. So there's a core program which is about the program strategy, the program design and so on, which everyone kind of goes through. But then what we have done is for different levels then design different programs. But delivery is a challenge because 20,000 people quickly have to deliver. So at least for what we said is that for 1,000 people, let us develop a kind of a program which has both development aspects and management aspects. There's the capacity to manage a project of this size is also a challenge in itself. So combine that, and I'm still looking around actually. So we have created a kind of a network of kind of management come social institutions like TIS and XIMB and all, who we are talking to, who can then tailor-make a program for, which has elements of development and elements of management and elements of leadership for the top 500 or 300 people, and for the other people who are more into the core implementation of the program, then we have created kind of training clusters and cells tied up state by state. So say Maharashtra tied up with TIS, XLRI, Jharkhand has tied up with XLRI, where some discussions and some training programs has been happening, which will then tailor make to the context of that state, because all these institutions also want to kind of get involved. It's just that you have to have the dialogue and do the matchmaking which we do.
So my question is regarding this national program. How do you measure success in this program? What are the timelines in terms of empowering these people? And considering that there are also millennium goals in part of them, how would you like to say the CSR, which has been by law now put as 2% of profits, amalgamated into such a national mission and conjointly, private sector along with this? Is it a worthwhile proposition?
See, money is not the issue. Let me say, the government has got so much money they can't spend it for these programs. And my job is sometimes giving the money and then taking it back and doing all the bureaucracy. So money is not the issue. The issue is, as I said, the issue is really creating a system which delivers right till the ground. So it's like, what is the delivery? It's not a product, but it's actually mobilizing the people, poor people. So that's what you have to deliver on the ground. Now, to create such a system requires a lot of assistance in hardcore management of project management, because you have to manage 4,000 people, you have to create a new culture in that organization, in the mission unit. So I think, one of the problems in our country is that unlike say USA, we professionals don't move from sector to sector. You just look at the USA, one day he is professor, next day he is Goldman Sachs, next day he is treasury. So they're moving around. In our system, in this country, human resource system, you get in and so you're a banker, so you become a banker throughout. You will never join the government. So you don't know how the government works. The government hires guys, join the government, only work. So this siloization of human resources is a big problem in a country, and that's why, so the government has stereotypes about the private sector. The private sector has stereotypes about the government, and so on and so forth. So to break that is a real challenge. It's a facilitating thing which, again, because I've been floating around this sector, that sector, one has to do, but it's a real challenge. Because what is the services that the private sector, and services I'm saying, they don't need the money, that the private sector can bring to the government? Just sheer management system there. Business processes, service delivery standards, what are the mechanisms, and then human resources, performance evaluation systems. And these are the things that I think the government systems, the programs need. First they need that. Second stage, they need hardcore, which is happening, which is public-private partnership kind of a thing where so we talk to Hindustan Lever's unit or ITC's unit in Bihar, which are into they are into incense stick meat marketing. So you link up incense stick women who are doing 200,000 women. Can you link that up so you have a partnership with them in that niche incense stick thing? And similar in agriculture, you have a partnership with them. So that's happening. You have to push it still, but it happens. ITC has a youth chapel, how do you involve them? So there are companies who are there in the rural areas who are either marketing products or purchasing products. Or some of these village organizations have become franchisees for companies for various products. So in a way they are the last product delivery system, so they don't need a salesman. So these companies train these women to deliver whatever, all kinds of things. So those things are happening. But I think the basic thing is about system development and modernizing that in the government, which is a challenge by itself.
Thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for participating in the discussion. I would now like to share my key learnings from this panel discussion. Strategy execution is not only at the top, it is also at the bottom. You need to know how your employees absorb the key objectives and how they execute at the functional level. Secondly, you need to know your business in and out. You need to know your people, set realistic targets, install robust systems, and move on. Practice clear and effective communication for executing strategy holistically. Be aware of the changing environment, adapt quickly, and instead of being reactive, be proactive. A good execution involves examining multiple variables, process them, and prioritize them for success. Strategy execution is not something we can control as much we would like to. But on behalf of School of Inspired Leadership family, I would like to express my gratitude for panel members for carrying such a wonderful discussion. This discussion has definitely deepened our understanding about strategy execution.